Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the Clutter Fairy Weekly for January 26th, 2021. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is our weekly webcast and podcast where we talk about all things organizing. And we use all of your comments in our social media channels to do that. We have a long topic archive page, topic suggestion page from you. So we gather those up and use them to see what's coming next. So we appreciate that you do that for us. Thank you.
If you're joining us in the Zoom meeting for the first time, you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets to them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature to let us know that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. We're streaming live on Facebook, so you can also share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And during the webcast every Tuesday, you can talk to us by calling 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 and password clutter to join the meeting. First thing we want to talk about today is following up on last week's homework assignment, and that was space and focus the medicine cabinet. Gayle, you want to talk about feedback we got on that?
Yes, we got a lot of feedback, and viewer Christine reminded us that the pharmacists recommend keeping the medications high and dry. So she was saying way up in the air so the kids can't get into it, stored away from the bathroom so that they are not humidified, they're not wet or messy, absorbing stuff. So that was one recommendation she made, which was a good idea. And then also Mikkel, I think that's how you say that, also reminded us to filter the makeup regularly, which I forgot to say, because makeup is really like little petri dishes growing bacteria. It's liquid and it's chemical, and once you crack open something and start getting air in there, it's going to start growing stuff. So it's a good reminder that you need to flip your makeup pretty regularly. Mikkel also suggested recycling. This is a good product recommendation. Suggested recycling the caps of the large laundry detergent. So when you screw off that really big cap and you turn it upside down, then it has a wide bottom, and it's a small enough thing that the little lid will sit on the shelves inside a medicine cabinet. So I thought it was a really clever suggestion as a container that is no cost idea. You can just recycle it off one of your laundry detergent bottles, and it's small enough to hold lipstick or chapstick standing up. You can put a few nail polishes in something like that. You can put little ointment tubes, eyes and Neosporin and those kinds of things. You could put little ointment tubes in a cup like that. It would be a great way to, and you can have a few of them and pull one down. You could just pull down the one you wanted with the stuff in it, and so it'd be a great way to subdivide at no cost to you and still be recycling a little bit. Thought that was a great idea.
Bonnie mentioned on a related note that she cleaned out old handbags to donate and found random antacid, ibuprofen, Tylenol, and cough drops that all needed to go.
They were all dead or dying in the bottom of the purses. Yes, that happens a lot.
So I think she gets at least partial credit for doing the assignment.
They went out of the purse and went straight to the trash instead of back in the medicine cabinet. Good on you, right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Okay, so our main topic for today comes to us from real life.
Right.
My parents live in an independent living section of a long-term care facility. All of the apartments in their building have small kitchens so that residents can cook for themselves as an alternative to using the communal dining room and meal plans. Last week, Mom and Dad were awakened early one morning by the sound of fire alarms going off. They threw on their robes and scurried out into the hallway where facility staff directed them to a safe area elsewhere in the building. I've noticed that several people had turned out without having time to put on shoes, so they tracked down some socks to distribute to all the barefoot residents. The fire department came and put out a small fire in a neighbor's unit. The cause of the fire was reported as a stack of paper that was piled close to the burner of a stove, and the elderly resident had accidentally turned on the burner.
And then gone to bed, apparently.
Yes. No one was hurt, and the damage in the affected apartment was minimal. The other residents were allowed to return to their homes a couple of hours later once the staff had made sure that all the apartments were cleared of smoke. But this incident really got my wheels turning on the subject of organizing for safety and ease of access. We covered this topic in August of 2017, but mom and dad's experience stirred up several additional issues I thought that we ought to cover.
Other than a son's panic, which
Right?
you could totally imagine. What do you mean there was a fire, Dad?
I
I'm sure
was
that was quite shocking.
actually kind of glad that I didn't hear about it until, like 12 hours later when it
All
was
was resolved.
everything was resolved. Yeah.
But part of the issue about them getting out of the house, A, barefoot, and B, barely clothed in their pajamas and a robe, was that your mother has some mobility issues. And so
Right.
your dad was sort of wheeling her out in something that's not exactly designed to be a wheeling seat.
Right.
And so, they were coping in a hurry with what was available to hand, but it probably wasn't the best solutions for them to choose. And that was part of the distress. Like, thank God it wasn't a bigger fire, and thank God it wasn't closer to them, and all those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, then your mind just spirals out with all the things that could go wrong. So I have a list of questions to start this conversation with. So let's go to those first. What if you had to get out of the house suddenly in the middle of the night? So it didn't happen to his parents because the fire was not big enough yet. But imagine if you woke up to a room that was filled with smoke. Are your clothes organized sufficiently that you could dress yourself quickly to be ready to leave your house and maybe be out for hours or days or weeks? Is there a clear spot available where you could sit to put your shoes and socks on? Depending on how much of an emergency it is, you may or may not have time to sit and put your shoes and socks on. But if you do, you want to be able to do that quickly. How easy is it to lay your hands on your most critical belongings or documents and essential medications? What risk is your clutter creating for you, the people you live with, and if you live in a multifamily structure like its parents, your neighbors? Is there paper clutter in your home in proximity to sources of heat or sparks or flames? So in this story, the paper was stacked near the stove, which is quite shocking to think about, but it could also be packaging of food stacked close to the stove. Like maybe you have boxes of pasta, or you have bag of bread that in theory the bread isn't going to catch on fire, but the plastic sleeve that it's in is going to catch on fire. We don't think about our food as something that will burn or catch on fire like paper, but things too close to a stove, all of them will eventually go up in flame. Is there clutter in your home that presents a hazard to other members of your household with less mobility or less physical strength than you? Maybe you live with elderly parents, or you have disabled housemates, or you have children or pets that can't manage by themselves. These are points of view to think about the clutter in your house. We talk all the time about how clutter disrupts our lives and our comfort and our productivity, our enjoyment and our pride in our homes. On the light end, we're inconvenienced by clutter. It's hard to get from room to room. We have to move a lot of stuff to get what we want out. Clutter slows us down and is annoying. But there are circumstances in which clutter becomes a serious threat to your health and your well-being. Everybody needs to walk around safely. Rescue teams need access to get to you, and you need to get out in case of fire or flood and sometimes clutter prevents that. You may be okay to navigate the house during the day with adequate light when you're not injured and you're not in a hurry. What happens when the power's out, or you're terrified, or you only have seconds to save yourself? Those haphazard piles could be the difference between getting out safely and not getting out at all. All this is complicated by your mobility. If you're using a walker or crutches, or you need to brace yourself on something sturdy to get up off the floor, you may not have someone strong nearby who can get you up. The slightest thing can make your home ecosystem fail in an emergency. So today we're going to cover the hazards that clutter creates, from the inconvenient to the life-threatening, and talk about how you can organize with an eye towards mitigating those risks. So let's go through some questions here. Are there parts of the house that you can't easily reach? So in my mind's eye, that I'm thinking of the doorways that get blocked off by pieces of furniture, or you have a bunch of boxes stacked in front of them, or you consider it an access point that you don't use all the time because you normally park your car in the garage and then you come in through the door that is from the garage into the kitchen, or you park in the driveway, which means that you come into the door from the back of the house instead of the front of the house. And so lots of times I see people block off the front door because they just don't use it, and they don't have people coming over often enough that they just direct their visitors to come to the back of the house as well. And so there may be a front door that you have blocked off that is the only door that you can get to in an emergency. So you want to consider that while you think it's a low traffic area and you are comfortable blocking it off, it might be your only means of escape in an emergency. And certainly a rescue vehicle, a fire truck, an ambulance is going to come to the front door first and try to come in the front door to get to you. And so if that's blocked off, then they have to make their way around the house and knock in windows or do whatever they need to do to get in the house. It'd be better if they could get in the front door. Are there rooms or spaces that you can't use at all? So the totally full junk room is at the top of the list. The blocked end of a hallway. Sometimes you get to the end of the hall and there's a room down there and you fill up the room and then you start filling up the hallway. Maybe the stairs are blocked. Clients are often making piles on the stairs, waiting to take things up, or using the stairs as additional floor space to stack things. So I've seen people, in essence, use the stairs like a shelf or as a sorting mechanism. And so they put different kinds of things on various stairs up all the way up, and cut their stairs in half basically, because they can, they don't need all the stairs to get up and down. It narrows the pathway up and down, and it makes going up and down the stairs much more hazardous. You can block a hallway, but if you block a hallway, you're creating an access choking point, just like a highway that's been narrowed down to one lane. If everybody gets caught in that narrow bottleneck point, it makes movement restricted, and it makes accidents likely to happen, and it makes getting in and out of the space much more restricted and slowed down. Timely for our tale today, can you reach your fire extinguisher easily without uncovering it or moving things out of the way to reach it? I'm guessing the resident whose apartment caught fire was asleep, probably, because you said it was at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that resident was asleep and was awakened like everybody else by the alarm and woke up to an apartment filled with smoke. So she didn't have time or the focus enough to handle the fire herself. If you have a fire in the house during the day while you're awake and you're able to respond, then you need to be able to grab your fire extinguisher quickly. If you can't get to it fast enough, you either have way more damage before you get the fire put out, or you will lose control of the fire completely. Being able to grab it is super important. Can you navigate the house easily during the day? Is it safe and easy to move about the house? Do you step over things to move around? So if you have to step carefully to keep from tripping or to prevent from knocking things over, if you're walking carefully between tall towers of things and you're having to step very gingerly to get through somewhere narrow, you're just inviting injuries. In addition, if you do twist an ankle or you break an arm, you may be sent home with crutches or a walker, or one of those rolling, I don't know what to call them. They're like little wagony things that are the little seats that you bend your leg and stick your knee up on. It has wheels, and so you sort of wheel yourself around the house. It's like a little mini bike somehow.
Yeah, I can't remember what they call it.
What do you call them, right? But you might come home with one of those, right? Trying to prop your ankle up. The hospital won't release you if you can't navigate your appliance through the house. So whatever you're using, the crutches or the walker or the little wagon thing, if you can't get that through the house, they won't let you go home. They're going to ask you if you have clear access, and they're going to want you to confirm. And I don't know how much effort they make to do that, but the first time you get a visit from a physical therapist at home and they realize you can't move the walker around, they're going to report that back to somebody.
They call the four-wheeled walker thing a rollator.
A rollator. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't know
I
the
don't,
answer to that.
yeah, I don't know if that's a brand name or just
A
something,
concept, right?
yeah, somebody came up with.
Well, the rollator is fairly wide, and it's got wheels on it, and you got to be able to roll it. And so you can't be rolling it through someplace really narrow. There's you on the rollator, and then the other half of you on the floor. So there's got to be some space.
Well, and it
I've been
has brakes as well and rubber wheels. And in order for it to work properly for you to lock in place when you
be
don't want to
stable.
move, you can't have anything. You can't have like paper scraps on the floor.
Can be
You have to have,
slippery underneath.
right.
I've been hired many times because someone came home from surgery or an injury and they couldn't navigate in the house. I did go to a facility like his dad is in because someone had a hip surgery. They came home and then they started having PT at home, and the PT person showed up and reported them to the social worker because they could tell that the person couldn't actually navigate with their walker around in the house. And so I got called in by the social worker to come and clear pathways so that they could move the walker around from the front door to the bedroom, to the bathroom, into the kitchen. Like there wasn't wide enough paths to use a walker safely. I had a client who called me from the hospital because he had a hip replacement surgery and they wouldn't release him until he could move the walker through his house. And this particular client, he was a hoarder, and his townhouse had a very narrow pathway from the front door to the kitchen, the back, and then his stairway was completely covered all the way up. And then the pathway into his bedroom was very narrow as well, and into the bathroom. And so he had to go upstairs to go to the bathroom. There was no bathroom downstairs because it was a townhouse. And then B, he couldn't move the walker around anywhere. And he lived alone. And so I had to bring in a team, and there was 5 of us. We spent 8 hours emptying enough stuff, and we couldn't even clear the hoard out. We just had to concentrate on uncovering the stairs, clearing the pathways. We had to make a wide enough pathway for him and a walker to move and be able to turn around in place and go back the direction he came. And so we spent hours and hours, and I had to rent a U-Haul to haul off cardboard boxes and other cardboard that was in the way. And we made a million trips out to the dumpster with trash, and that was just clearing the pathway so he could maneuver. And he absolutely had to have that clear so that he could safely walk around. Like, when are you most likely to get hurt again? When you're already hurt, right? So you didn't want to have a hip replacement surgery and then go home and fall down. So it was very important to clear that out. And like I said, I get those kind of calls all the time, often from the hospital because they've just been confronted with can you move your walker around? And they say, well, no, not really. And then the doctor's like, oh, well, then you can't go home. They're not very happy about it, and they have to get somebody else to come and clear it because it's too late for them to do it. So here's one to think about. Can you easily navigate during the night to go to the bathroom or to the thermostat or to the doors? So after we get in bed, we don't really want to get up and turn on the lights when we have to go to the bathroom or go adjust the AC. How many times have you stubbed your toe in the dark? So the more stuff that's in the way, the more likely an injury is going to happen when you get up in the dark in the dead of night and you're half awake to go do something. And imagine that, like his parents, they were sound asleep, they got woken up, and suddenly you have to get all your snap working and be able to navigate and move around and respond to an emergency. And I don't know about you, but I'm not super cooking with gas when I first wake up. And I'm pretty sure that when the house is on fire, you don't have time to go get a cup of coffee before you try to leave. So you need to assume that you're in a foggy, sleepy state when you wake up and have to respond to a panicked emergency. And anything that's in your way is just going to make it harder for you to respond. Are there objects on the floor or items that are stacked in sort of precarious stacks that could cause you injury? If you were on the floor and you needed to push against something stable to get up, Like I have to do this. I'm old enough that my knees don't really make me pop up off the floor with super ease, and I will reach over and push against a wall or a floor or a sturdy piece of furniture to help me get up. If you don't have access to something to get you up, would you be able to get up off the floor? If something fell over on you or a stack tripped you up or made you fall, would you be able to get back up again? A small pile of papers on the floor could cause you to trip, or it would interfere with the walker, or it would interfere with the braking of the rollator. All of those things prevent safe movement through the house. If you stumbled into a tower of boxes or objects, you could end up at the bottom of a collapsed pile. So I've seen that a lot. People create towers of objects in the house, and they don't think about how to make that tower stable. They just sort of treat it like a Jenga stack, and they just keep, there's something small and cushy and soft on the bottom, and there's heavier things on the top that are wider, and it's sort of like swaying like a a tower in the wind. And they just assume that because right now they can easily navigate around it and not knock it down, then you would end up being able to walk by it without any interruption, without it knocking down. But what if you trip one day, or you accidentally have to stabilize yourself and you put your hand out to one of those towers and it all knocks over? I think that we create those stacks without much thought to how stable it is and how it could survive if we fell on it. And then when you fall on it, it's too late to realize it's not stable enough. So something to consider in clearing away the stuff. You might kick a stray box with your toe. Imagine stepping on a Lego or two, how painful it would be. A lot of those things on the floor end up causing injury and pain just because they hurt when you step on them, or you slip when you step on them. And it isn't the actual clutter that causes it, is the pain inducer. It's the falling down, it's the tripping, it's the knocking into the walls, it's twisting the ankle that happens because you've touched the clutter. So this happened to one of my clients. Is your access clear so you could get out in an emergency situation like a fire or a flood or a burglary? God forbid, if you need to exit the building in a hurry, sometimes you can't use the usual pathway out. I talked about that earlier. You need all the exits clear and all the paths to the exits clear so you can navigate when you're trying to get out of the house for your own safety. The access that you normally use every day, the fire is not going to respect that you only go out the front door, that you never use the back door, or vice versa. You're going to have to be able to get to whatever exit is working. And the idea that you're going to be able to take 8 minutes to unclear the stuff in front of the window to get out the only window that you have access to in the fire is not realistic. You probably don't have that much time. So now's the time to make sure they're clear. If you had an accident or a medical emergency, could the rescue workers get to you? And could they get you out again? So you got to imagine that a big gurney comes, and there's two EMTs with it, and they have two full-size gear bags because they're bringing all of the equipment that they bring to you to treat you in situ, basically where you are. They need to check you, and they need to maybe shock you, and they're going to bring, they come with all this stuff. They come with all the meds and everything. So they've got huge bags they're hauling with them. And could they get into the house with all that stuff and treat you and get you on a gurney and roll you out again? It's one thing for you to be able to walk very carefully around some piles and skirt sideways through some tight spaces yourself, but an EMT is going to need a lot more room than that. I had one client who she had some sort of heart attack, and she managed to call EMS, and they came, but they couldn't get through the front door. The front door only opened about 1.5 feet. There was a bunch of stuff behind it, and the living room had mounds of stuff that came down sort of into a valley in the middle, and there was no way the EMT can get through there. So they ended up knocking the window out to her bedroom and climbing through the bedroom window to get to her, and then they had to take her back out the bedroom window as well. So all of that slowed them down. It made their response to her slower. It made the ability for her to get to the hospital slower because it was so hard to get to her. Now, granted, she was a client of mine who was a hoarder, and her situation was on the extreme level. And it was very dense in the apartment, and I'm sure a hazardous situation that EMS dreads and trains for because it happens more than we like to think. But if you have anything that gets in the way of somebody with a gurney and bags getting to you quickly and easily, then you're the person that's suffering for their lack of mobility and access to you. Just something to remember. If you make it hard for them to get to you, you slow down their ability to help you. So,
We had a comment from Connie said, my friend had to clear paths when her grandchild started crawling. So a lot of our focus today so far has been on the elderly and on infirmity, but there are other situations as well. And
a little
even
kid is the worst about, they will go and grab something and pull something down on top of them with the greatest of ease. I
yeah,
mean,
without
everybody's been around a toddler, right?
without a moment's hesitation.
Right? And they
And
have no sense of self-preservation.
I have I'm suffering right now from a pulled muscle or something. I have a sore hamstring or knee. I don't really know exactly what I've done. And I'm a man, so I haven't gone to the doctor because we don't go to the doctor unless
Unless you're
it's
dying.
unless we're dying or convince ourselves we're dying. Anyway, I realize that even when you're only having a small infirmity, even a little trouble walking, a little trouble getting up out of chairs, it suddenly becomes very important that surfaces, stable surfaces are reachable. So you can sort of stabilize yourself on the edge of the counter, stabilize yourself on the edge of the dining room table as you walk through when you're not at 100%.
Because it interferes with your gait. The way that you walk is odd when you're injured, and so you lurch to the side instead of straight forward. And yeah, it's very it definitely interferes. And you want to be able to get yourself in and out of the chair, get up and down from the table, and suddenly you need all this more room to make that happen when you're injured.
Yeah.
And the more severe the injury, the bigger space you need to navigate. That is 100% true, as I'm well finding out. Yeah, you and me and our our competing needs at this point.
Right.
So these are all the toddler one. I see one flashing by talking about puppies. Oh my God. A cat, a kitten, or a puppy is just like a toddler. So for the first year of a cat or a puppy's life, they are complete balls of energy, running nonstop. They will knock down anything in their path. They'll go put their mouths and their hands on everything. They are going to be grabbing and pulling. And a kitten or a puppy, they will be crawling up stuff. They'll be ricocheting, like they'll be running and slamming into the walls, and they'll be running and slamming into the piles. And man, there's nothing like a young, energetic pet to point out all of the flaws in your landscape. I'll tell you that right now. That's 100% true. They calm down later, and then they learn to work around your environment, and they learn to judge, gee, that tower is a little too unsafe and I probably shouldn't jump on it. But it takes them a year or so to gain that wisdom, and during that year you will lose a lot of stuff in the process. So toddlers of any kind will cause you that kind of problems. Yes, they are very entertaining. You're correct. But they're also they create little destruction in their wake. So if you don't want the kitten at the bottom of a tower, and you don't want the dog to knock over something and catch something on fire because they knocked something over into the stove, and you don't want the toddler pulling stuff down on top of themselves or you, then clearing the space out is an important goal. And things that are put away, things that are packed up, things that are in cabinets, on bookshelves are generally safe. But I have found myself putting my hand against a bookcase thinking that it's stable, only to realize that when I push on it, it rocks. So sometimes you will push your hand out and touch something, and it will, maybe I'm just going to lean against it while I'm talking to somebody about what's going on the bookshelf, and I touch it or lean against it and it moves. And so a lot of times the furniture is not as stable as you think. So these are all things to consider when you're trying to make sure that A, you can safely get in and out of all the exits, and B, you can get in and out of the bathroom in the dark, and that you can walk on the floor in a safe way in the house. So these are all reasons that came. This is all, we've covered all this stuff in various forms over time, but we did want to circle back because Ed's parents had a very real experience, and I'm sure that, they went out without their shoes on and socks. They were, how old is your dad, Ed?
He turned 90 in October.
Right? So his 90-year-old dad is trying to help his 80-something-year-old mother down the hall in a fire on a device that wasn't designed really to be a mobility device. Like, you don't want to find yourself in that situation. I can still get myself out of the house, but I also have access to all of my doors and windows. So wherever the fire, if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's something happening in the house, then I know all the places I can get out. And you want to be able to get out too. I think that's the most important thing to take out of this.
Yes.
The person that had the paper next to the stove, if it had happened during the day, then the response, she might have been able to respond to it herself. And I'm concerned that if she accidentally turned the stove on, or the oven on, stove on, and had paper near it, so it must have sat there and slowly, like it took a while for something to catch. So it might not have been really close, but it was close enough that several hours later, it finally caught fire.
Yeah, I don't know all the details, and a complicating factor is my parents live in the independent living section.
Right.
If they were in assisted living or nursing care, there would be other people in and out of the apartment all the time. So independent living carries a little extra risk that your neighbors might be, part of their independence might be a hoarding problem.
Right.
Part of how they express their independence.
Well, and
Too much
part of
stuff.
their independence is they still have a stove, right? And
They still
at
have a
some
stove,
point,
right?
you don't get to have a stove anymore.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the regular person in their regular house, of course you're going to have a stove. And so the message to take from here's regular people is, you don't want stuff next to heat sources. You don't want it to be next to the stove. You don't want it to be next to the toaster. You don't want it to be next to the space heater or the, fill in the blank, the fireplace, all those things. There's other things in the house that will catch fire besides the fire in the fireplace. And so you want to make sure that you're not accumulating. I mean, lots of people bring paper into their kitchen. That's where all the things that catch on fire are, and they bring their mail into the kitchen all the time. And they have big stacks of cookbooks, and they have lots of fuel for a fire in there. So you definitely want to keep those things separate from each other, right? And not make it super easy to catch something on fire. And then get out if you be able to get out if it does.
Linda mentions poor or limited vision can add to these difficulties as well, which is a very good point.
100%. That is an excellent point. And, if you're you can't really see very well, then you may not see that there's a fire until you're standing on top of it. Right?
And Lise mentioned it's concerning that her mom has something cooking and falls asleep. She has burned up a few pans.
Uh-oh.
And South Dakota mama said, my husband and son want paper towels close to the stove. This concerns me.
Yeah, that would be a little nerve-wracking. I can see that.
Yeah.
So you might figure out a way to have the paper. Let's say, how could you, like if it was up in the air, if you mounted it under the cabinet?
Yeah, mounted.
So it's not, it couldn't like fall or tip over next to the stove.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Can't fall onto the hot stove.
Yeah, if it's attached to something so that it can't move, even if they pull on it, they can't, get the whole roll into the the fire would be good.
I can't remember when we talked about recipes a few weeks ago, someone said I stack the recipes on a shelf until the stack collapses
until they fall
on
over.
Me. That's how I know. So you definitely don't want that stack to be anywhere in range of the stove.
No, away from the stove, away from the oven, right? It needs to be away from those fire sources. And the toaster. The toaster better not be underneath that stack, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's 100% true. And then the other thing is to make sure that you really do know how to operate the fire extinguisher and you can get to it quickly. And if you're not comfortable operating it, then grab the water, throw the water on it, smother it with you smother it
Baking
with
soda.
flour or baking
Baking soda.
soda. Yeah, I mean, grease fires on the stove are their own little animal, and you got to make sure that you don't accelerate it or make it worse with your response. So reading on things that you're supposed to do and preparing now while you're not worried about it, while you're not in stress. The idea of trying to read the instructions of a fire extinguisher while you're under duress.
While there's a fire.
Right? heightens the experience a little bit, right? I see. Connie says,
when I was a child, we had a rule that we couldn't walk in the kitchen without shoes on in case something broke on the tile floor.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
That's a good rule.
That's a very good rule. And I think the kitchen in general is someplace where, because there's so many hazards there for injury, I think keeping the floor in the kitchen clear is really important. You don't want a bunch of stuff on the floor around you. Imagine if something that was on fire, came off the stove, fell over the stove, trickled down and dropped onto a bag full of stuff at the bottom. Like, you don't want a bunch of fuel on the floor around the stove either. So clearing out the floor helps with the fire, and it also helps with mobility. So you really want those pathways through the house to all be clear enough for everybody to navigate without having to tiptoe, without having to scrunch yourself up to slide down the hallway. If it's too tight to move and it's difficult, or you have to be careful to move during the day when the sun's up and you're awake and alert. If it's hard to navigate under those circumstances, it's going to be deathly to navigate at night in the dark, under duress, under illness, fire, injury. So you want to consider, how easy can I get out of here if I'm impaired in some way?
Maida says, my coworker has burned styrofoam takeout containers on top of the stove, causing an evacuation of the apartment building.
Right? Styrofoam melts, baby, and catches on fire just like everything else.
Yeah,
and
pretty quickly.
That's the thing about having crowded countertops, right? So clearing the countertops out away from the stove. If you've ever watched a Hoarders episode, and whenever they go into the kitchen, there's always hoard right up to the edge of the stove, and then sometimes it's on top of the stove, and then there's like one burner that they use, and then there's stuff all over the rest of it, and it's like, oh my gosh, how have they not killed themselves yet? Because there's so much fuel so close to a heat source, and it's always amazing to me that they haven't caught themselves on fire. And not everybody's a hoarder, and not everybody's dealing with that level of disaster, of volume of stuff that they have to move around. And so, excellent. That just means the project's going to be easier for you, and the risk is the same. So you want to make sure that you can get through all that stuff.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you in a moment for final thoughts on this topic and a fresh homework assignment. But I wanted to take just a second to remind viewers and listeners that our YouTube channel has more than 150 videos on lots and lots of organizing topics. Go to cfhou.com/YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel on YouTube and then click the bell icon next to the subscribe button if you'd like to get notifications when we post new content. Also, a reminder that you can hire Gayle. We like to pitch this every once in a while for anyone who doesn't know this already. If you live in the Houston area, Gayle can come visit you in person and work with you to organize in a low contact and COVID appropriate manner. And anywhere in the world, maybe not completely on the other side of the world. I don't know how that would work, but anyone can hire Gayle for virtual organizing sessions. Go to cfhou.com/virtual to learn more about that. Okay, Gayle, final thoughts on this topic.
So if you're wondering where to start decluttering, then this is an effective first step. Removing blockages so that you can get out of the house and emergency services can get in the house can only improve your living situation. If you've got low energy or minimal mobility, then this is something worth using your limited energy to accomplish. And as we've all heard a million times, safety first. So aim your organizing efforts to improve your own safety, and it's a great place to get started.
South Dakota mama mentioned neighbors left the dryer running and their house burned down.
Oh no,
So
isn't that
awful.
terrible?
Yeah.
Right?
I want to remind everyone that we'll be back next week, same time, Tuesday, February 2nd. That's Groundhog Day in the United States at noon US Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. Let's go to our next homework assignment.
Okay, y'all, we've been talking about it. So this is your homework assignment. I want you to clear the access to all the exits, or if they're already clear, then you can clear out any obstruction on the floor. Or if those are already clear, then you want to find an easy grab location for the fire extinguisher. And if you're already happy with where your fire extinguisher is and you think it's easy to grab, then I want you to go read the fire instructions, the instructions for the extinguisher, so that you know how to operate it in case you catch the kitchen on fire and you have to put a fire out. I don't want you to have to figure out how to work it in a panic mode. So if all of those things are okay in your house and you don't need to clear the access to the exits or clear out the floor, and you're good with where the fire extinguisher is, then go read the instructions. Those are your homework assignments. Let's see how many people find that they have an exit or two to uncover, or they have an obstruction on the floor they need to clear out.
And
We'll wait to hear from you.
And if none of those homework assignments pertain to you, then you are in really good shape.
And you don't need to listen to me.
And you get a gold star, at least for this week.
Right?
Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, we would love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming in the YouTube comments, on Facebook, or anywhere else that you find us. We've also been working our way through chat transcripts from all of our Zoom meetings and scaring up lots and lots of wonderful ideas from viewers for more things to talk about. Right. And I saw a few more go by in today's chat. So
yay. So thank you for participating.
Keep the comments, questions, and topic suggestions coming. And you can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
You guys, it's so great to see you. We're so glad that you came and listened to us talk today. I am also going to remind you that we are available on Patreon. If you'd like to support our efforts, cfhou.com/Patreon, Patreon. And we would very much appreciate anything that you have to say about it, anything you want to contribute to us. Somebody's asked us, tell us about the necklace. It is a little rabbit. This is one of my pieces for the week. It is there's a metal blank and a stone, and this is a little rabbit, and there's some fringe on the end. Thank you. One of my projects.
Fabulous.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We will be here next week, ready to talk about how it went clearing out your space and with new homework for you. Oh, that was one thing I wanted to say too, that the homework, we have a whole spreadsheet of all the comments, the names that you're offering for our homework assignment. So we're working on the spreadsheet, we're making decisions about it, and we're still looking for more input until the end of January. We're going to make a decision at the end of January. So it's almost time to pick one. So we will see you. The winner's going to get an hour virtual organizing session for free. So we appreciate your participating, and everybody's already given them, and we hope that we'll get some more.
All right. Thanks.
That's everything this week. See you. Bye.
Bye.